Here it tells us his memory is being kept very much alive by a Coral Springs collector.
There was only one headline in the newspapers 22 years ago today. Most people 26, 27 years of age or older vividly remember where they were, what they were doing on this day in 1963.
22 years ago today, I was in Monroe, Michigan in the 4th grade class. I was 9 years old, and we were studying U.S. presidents. And on that Friday morning, we started studying President Kennedy. And my principal walked in and said that the president was killed.
From that time on, F.N.Ciacelli became an avid collector of Kennedy memorabilia. He has a collection of over 150 newspapers dated November 22, 1963. He has an exact replica of the 1961 Lincoln Continental Parade car, Kennedy Road in Dallas. Ciacelli has over 20,000 items relating to John F. Kennedy.
I wanted to find a way that I could have other people and myself remember President Kennedy. So I guess that's what prompted it. I want other people to remember President Kennedy, not to forget him.
F.N.Ciacelli is not an assassination buff. His collection capitalizes on the life of Kennedy. Someday he has dreams of opening a museum for his vast collection.
I think that John Kennedy was a president that was a president of his time, that is of the 1960s. But more importantly, I think he's a president of the 1980s.
In Coral Springs, Don Dare, News Center 7.
People still remember that day vividly.
And exactly where they were, that's the
healthy and with a long tale of where he's been.
Is still one of the president's biggest fans. He has more than 7,000 pieces of Kennedy memorabilia. Just a fraction of that material, including a replica of the president's limo, is on display through this weekend at Pompano Square Shopping Center. For Ciacelli and many other Americans, Kennedy is still one of the country's best-loved presidents, and he's committed to keeping those memories alive.
Phones were ringing.
Tonight to the Armando Garcia.
Used by the father finally.
F.N.Ciacelli killed him. Touching tributes at Arlington and around the country today for our nation's 35th president. Had he lived, John Kennedy would have celebrated a birthday today. Eyewitness News reporter Jerry Helfman says the memory of JFK still touches America.
A city does not become free merely by calling it a free city.
He would have been 70 years old today. Members of the Kennedy clan gathered in Cambridge, Massachusetts to dedicate a park in his honor. A wreath was laid on his grave at Arlington National Cemetery. Most people remember not his birthday, but rather where they were the day he died.
I went home, my mother was crying, and then when I got home from school, my father was crying, and it made a very big impression on me as a young person, because young people are impressionable, to see these adults crying. So I knew there was something that I had to do to learn more about President Kennedy.
From that day on, F.N.Ciacelli devoted his life to collecting Kennedy memorabilia. He's got a plate collection, a book collection, a photograph collection, commemorative coins, and the front pages of newspapers from November of 1963. Perhaps the most notable piece of his collection, a 1961 Lincoln Continental, a replica of the presidential limousine in which Kennedy was assassinated.
There was a time that the country was sort of innocent. You could have a United States president ride in an open convertible and didn't think twice about the fate what was going to happen. Today in 1987, that's unheard of. So really, I want people to remember President Kennedy, but I also want people to remember the 1960s.
Ciacelli says he capitalizes on Kennedy's life, not his death. He calls him the last president we all felt good about. Ciacelli will take his collection on the road next year. He hopes to establish a museum near the Kennedy Space Center, where he says the only thing Kennedy is remembered by is his name. He also says Kennedy should be remembered not only on November 22nd, but on his birthday as well. In Coral Springs, Jerry Helfman, Channel 10 Eyewitness News.
there's also a serious side to the Great State Fair, such as exhibits that tell the history of New England and our country and those who played a role in shaping that history. Beth Carroll is also with Big E tonight to tell us about a new exhibit featured this year. Beth?
Dave, it's called JFK Remembered, and the owner, F.N.Ciacelli, tells me that 20,000 people a day have come to see this exhibit, which has more than 500 pieces, and he's carrying one of them here. And Fred, explain to me what you wrote.
What we have here is John Kennedy's jewelry box, and this was brought with the president every day, of course, that he traveled, and it was at the White House in the living quarters upstairs. But the unusual thing about it is not only does it have the family crest on it, inside is all his jewelry intact from 1963, including a few notable pieces such as his Christian Dior jewelry here, his black onyx, and his presidential cufflinks. And of course, we all know he was in Dallas that week. He borrowed the cufflinks from the Lieutenant Governor of Texas, and they're still in here. He probably wore those during the day before when they were in Houston.
How did you start collecting all this?
I was like everybody else. I was 9 years old in 1963, and we were studying U.S. presidents that day. And I said I was going to meet President Kennedy one day, and of course he died the next day, and I never stopped collecting.
Now, you have met a lot of people, haven't you, that have given you JFK stories, people that are from Western Mass and have stopped by.
Well, it's amazing coming here to Massachusetts because we've been to other cities in the country, but here people come in and they say, oh, let me show you a picture of JFK and I at church, or JFK and I having a beer or something, and it's really quite amazing coming to Massachusetts. The love for this man that still exists today, very strong.
Now, I know we see the jewelry here in the case. What else can you expect to see at the exhibit?
You're going to see John Kennedy's sweater that he was very proud of. Matter of fact, it was given to him by Jackie Kennedy. And you're going to see his last doodles, which he drew sailboats that he drew aboard Air Force One a few minutes before the Dallas trip. You're going to see a dagger that when he went to Germany in 1963, that the Chancellor of Germany gave to President Kennedy in 1963, and about 500 beautiful items, 3 beautiful movies running on them, and he's almost going to come back to life here in Massachusetts.
And that's at the New England Center for the duration of the fair.
Yeah, we're glad to be here.
Okay, F.N.Ciacelli, thank you for joining us tonight, and we'll be stopping by and getting a glimpse of the exhibit. Thanks again. So just one of the many popular exhibits here at the Big E. And Dave, coming up at 6, I'll talk a little bit more about the agricultural side of the Big E. Back to you.
All right.